So I just got off a call with a wonderful client, and we were having a really interesting conversation and made me feel really inspired to share a little bit about the ideas that were being shared and expressed on that call. They had to do with the things that manifest through the body, really to get our attention and bring our attention inwards so we can get an understanding of what's really at the root of this. And this is one of my passions. This is, I believe, a big part of why I'm here at this time on the planet, is to be able to shine the light and guide people to this inner exploration. And so this conversation was all about that. But the theme that I really wanted to share here was the way that what's happening in our lives, whether it's something that's happening inside the body or externally in our outside world, things are happening not just for a reason, but they're happening because they are serving us in some way. And one of the most potent aspects of the conversation centered around this idea, because although I think many people have the understanding that if something happens to me, for example, a really common one that I think is widely accepted and understood is, for example, if I sprain my ankle or I break my leg, that's the universe, quote unquote, trying to tell me I need to slow down. There's probably some truth to that in just about everyone's situation. But the part that we explored more deeply was the idea that beyond just those really obvious and simple statements that the body may be trying to make, the body and the rest of your being, your soul, your higher self, and the aspects that make up who you are as a multidimensional being, they're all working in concert to orchestrate events, to bring things to your attention, not just physically, but more so what's running on the inside, what is taking place in your thoughts and particularly your beliefs, or the programs and conditioning that may be causing you to respond to life in a certain way. And if it's standing in the way of you actualizing your fullest potential as a divine being, and really awakening to the truth of who you are, those things got to come to the surface. And we can work on problems until we're blue in the face. If something is still serving, it doesn't matter what you do. If it's still serving, it needs to stay. There's no sense in us chasing things to try and clear them or transmute them if they are of service. And so it allowed us to look at what that really means. And what does it mean? So I ask you, what does it mean when something is still serving you? So I'd ask you, look at yourself, look at your own life. Where have you had something take place, like a physical manifestation? Is there a pattern of something that's happened in your life where, you're constantly seeing this thing show up? And if you have tried so many different things to relieve it, there is a really good chance that the reason it's not going, it's not releasing, it's not shifting, is because it's still serving you in some way. Now, the obvious example that I just mentioned about, needing to slow down, that's one thing. But what's usually at the root of these kinds of things, as I've been doing this work with folks, with the focus on what's at the root of the belief, and this is a piece that has been coming more and more into the foreground the longer I do this work, and especially at this time right now, because the time that we are going through presently is about awakening. And how does that relate to your own personal injuries or illnesses? It's about drawing attention even more deeply inward to what is at the root of what it is that you're experiencing. It's not just those surface level things anymore that are being brought to the surface or being brought to our attention. Those are easy enough for us to pick up on. These days, what I see coming up for folks is things that are more core. Yes, this may be asking me to slow down, but what is it asking me to slow down and look at? What message is my body trying to relay for my higher consciousness to bring to the surface so that I can finally transmute it? So what's behind me moving too quickly? What's behind me rushing? Is it a fear that I'm not going to get it done? Is it a feeling of obligation that I need to complete this thing or I need to do these things in order to have someone's approval, in order to feel like I've done enough, in order to feel good enough? I mean, the options are almost endless because our minds, and particularly the ego mind, can create story after story, justification and label, you name it. It will go in any direction it needs to keep us on that pattern, keep us on that track, that pattern of thought, which ultimately leads to a pattern of emotional response. And then that pattern of emotional response leads to an underlying pattern of baseline frequency. And that baseline frequency is what ends up creating the environment for our cellular body. And I mean, this is like epigenetics kind of 101, right? It's at the root of how and why and in what state we walk around in as human beings. Call I had today, we asked some really big questions, and I wanted to ask the same questions of you. So look at something that's been manifesting in your own life. Do you have a physical ailment that just won't go? What's at the root of it? What is your body trying to support you in bringing forward? What are the questions you could be asking? And then, still on the same line of service, is who else are you serving by still having this illness be present? This is sort of the part 2 or the part B to this whole question of why ailments stick around. And if they're sticking around because they are still serving us, how are they serving us? So part of it is that they will be serving us, meaning bringing those ideas, those limiting beliefs and thought programs and patterns to the surface so that we can resolve them. But the other piece is, what role are you playing for someone else by still having that physical manifestation of the problem? And this is the part that I see that is not often talked about and not often in people's awareness, is that the body and the things that we experience physically are things that are also serving others. It's not just the things that we're doing consciously, by being hard on someone or by getting into a fight or, on the opposite end of the scale, by being generous or being kind. We are serving each other by playing roles for each other all the time. But sometimes it's those roles that we're playing that we're unaware of. Like when we're struggling or suffering with something, we are still playing a role for the others that we interact with. My client had been dealing with an issue for a while. It was a skin condition, and went to go see an allergy specialist. And in his particular case, the body was not ready to let go of the condition physically because it said it was still serving in some way. And so as we explored that, it was really fun because you can look, and as you look deeper, the storylines that can surface really open the mind to the potential of what's possible, and also the potential of the impact that we're actually having on others as we simply go through our everyday life, that part of our life that feels so insignificant because it's not where we're on the stage thriving, celebrating, and being these big creator gods that we are. It's in these moments when we are perhaps struggling with our own challenges where we are also being of service. How many times have you met somebody and one word that they say or one comment that they make to you, and it changes the trajectory of your whole day? In some cases, it stays with you and impacts your entire life. Like things just are never the same after that moment. We recognize when those things happen to us, but how many times do those things actually happen when we say things? What could possibly be waiting in the wings that still needs to happen so that we can come to an insight, or we can have the emotional or physical experience that our soul, higher self, body wanted to have? But it could also be that we're serving others in the same way that others have impacted us so greatly by just a word, by just a phrase.